Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert.
Not on our last episode.
Not on our last episode. Which,
yeah.
I mean, now you got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Adam and I have been going through a little bit of a conundrum lately of whether or not we want to continue to Be the Wellness Podcast. And, you know, we've been doing it for 3 years now? 4 years? 5 years?
Yeah,
6 years?
forever.
I mean, a really long time.
Yeah.
And as some of you may have noticed, we take some intermittent breaks and we really just want to be in the flow of it when we do it. So, you know, after doing something for so long, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort and it's a lot of RAM, and we don't want to force it. We don't want to just be in this machine of scheduling people and like constantly be churning out material if it's stuff that's not inspiring or interesting. So we really do the podcast that speak to us, that inspire us, that we're excited to do. Yeah. But we had this conversation the other day of if we should stop, if we should end the podcast. And we actually decided we would.
Well, no, we said we were just going to take a pause. Not like we were going to pull anything down. Or, what we decided was, well, let's just take a break.
We'll take a break. Yeah.
We'll announce it. We'll take a break.
Yeah. And
you got cold feet.
And then I got cold feet because I was like, but I love our podcast. Yeah. It's really tough.
So now we'll just publish like an episode every couple of months, but we're not on a break.
we're not on a break. We did not break up. But yeah, you know, I think it's good just to let people know where we're coming from, because it's not just the fact that like, you know, we're not being flighty or spacey about it, but it is after 6 years of hosting a podcast, 10 years, 20 years, lifetimes.
Yeah.
You do come up against like not wanting to talk about stuff you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredibly difficult to fake it.
Exactly.
Through a podcast. You're like, oh, how did we get this person? You know? And I mean, and this has only happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
You know, over the 220 something episodes where you're like, what?
Guess which ones they were. No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, that's the thing though, right? Is like you can tell. When you're listening, you know, it's like people are like, oh, okay, they don't seem very excited about this.
It's funny because I can't even think of one person. Well, as you say that, I'm like, I can't even think of the one podcast that might have been on. So I'm like, really?
Me neither, really. But like, I remember it happening, like occurring in the moment where we're like, well, because there was this whole thing, right, where we started. Once we got to like a certain level that. Like publicists, right? These like publishing that these people they represent 150 authors, and so they just pepper you with stuff, and you're like, oh, this might be interesting. You know, and in the beginning it was like, somebody wants to be on our podcast, you know, like let's let them on, and then after a while you're like, wait a minute. This is like not stuff that we want to talk about. Like we wouldn't have sought this person out. And then we switched and we're like, okay, no more of this. Like we seek people out and have them on. And and, you know,
so if you try to come on our podcast, it's a futile effort. We will. Well,
not necessarily. You just have to be really interesting. You have to be interesting. And be like down to just bullshit.
Yeah. But no, it's true, because we did make a shift where it was like, no, we want to choose the conversations we're having, because then we're interested. We're genuinely interested in having them. And then that translates for sure. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So anyway, it's, you know, this is just a further refinement of that.
Yes.
You know, it's
you just what have to be really, really interesting now.
Fewer and fewer things and less things that we're actually interested in.
But I mean, funny. This is actually the conundrum of a podcast, right? Because you do cover so many topics, and over the course of so many years, you're like, oh, we talked to someone kind of like that already. I mean, we already covered that. And so it is really interesting that you're kind of like, well, what could we talk about that is interesting. And then we realize it's clearly the Akashic Records.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, duh.
It's on the top of the list. There's one more thing on the podcast front. So it's funny because like when we first started this, we were like, okay, we need to come up with a format. You know, it's like, what's our format? It's like if you listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast, there's a format that it follows, you know, for sure. Every single one. Renegade Radio, you know, Jay Ferrugia, solid format. Every single time it's the same. You can expect like the exact same interview essentially with different people. And so we were like, okay, we're going to do this thing. And we're going to, that lasted like 2 episodes. And we were like, nah, it's easier for us to just talk about stuff. But this is what you run into if you don't have a format.
Yeah.
Like if you have a format, you can just power through and people know what to expect when they get on there. Oh, this person is going to get asked more or less these questions. And this is what I'm going to learn about them when I listen to this podcast. We just didn't do that.
Meanwhile, I'm standing on my head thinking about how I could podcast upside down this week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we just opted for a different flow.
You know what? I think it speaks to something though, and that's that you know, times are changing, and that we aren't as rigid of a species anymore. And I think that many of us are finding that rigidity is really uncomfortable, and that we have to be fluid and we have to be flexible. And I mean, God bless you if you're Tim Ferriss and you can do 1 million trillion episodes in the same format. Yeah. But I think, you know, this is something that we talk about all the time in Kundalini yoga, and it's kind of in the conversation, is this shift from the Piscean era to the Aquarian age, where things are more fluid. We're coming out of that more methodical way of processing information, and we're kind of moving into a more quantum experience where it's just like, yeah, maybe you can't actually figure the thing out on paper. It's more of a feeling and energy and essence, a shift in consciousness. And I think that that's what our podcast kind of reflects. It's like, yeah, we're just not intrinsically who we are, just doesn't want to be stagnant in our process. Yeah. And I think if you really look at it, it's like all of us, well, not all of us. Some people really, really love routine, and it gives them great comfort, and they really love that kind of boundaries and strict nature of things. But I think most of us like fluidity. Most of us like ebb and flow. We like seasonality. We like shifts. We like changes. It's very human.
Within some parameters, right? So that's I mean, if you think about like the fundamental nature of reality, it's oscillations, right? Everything is based on some sort of wave function oscillation. What the amplitude of that is, right, is how much swishy swashiness you can accommodate, right? Yeah. And so like each of us like flexibility within the back confines of what we're comfortable with.
Yeah, true.
Right. And so like that's the thing that I think is occurring at some level, is the amplitude is getting greater, right? The differences between things, the fluidity, like the number of things that we have to be able to keep somewhat top of mind are greater than they've ever been, right? In order to just function, right? We need to know how a car works. We need to know how your phone works. We need to know how a computer works. We need to know how ATM machines work. You know, and there's like a lot of things, and there's more and more and more and more every day, and they're constantly changing, right? So like a perfect example of this is the order of operations for like checking out with a credit card at a grocery store. Every one of those fucking things is different. Like put the chip in. No, don't put the chip in yet. Wait for the cashier, right? It's like, oh, took it out too soon. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like every one of them is different. And so if you think about like the amount, the ability to keep this shit straight is ever increasing, right? Or like the amount of RAM required to keep all of this stuff straight is increasing like dramatically, you know? And so you look at the kids who've got it all figured out. Like they never miss a beat on this stuff, you know? And it's like
their RAM is like way, way high powered.
They're processing. They're just, that's all they're focused on.
Yeah.
We still, you know,
they have no hard drive. It's all RAM.
It's all in the, it's all in the cloud.
Exactly.
They're like cloud-based RAM. That's just how they operate.
Which is exactly why we're talking about the Akashic Records.
Yeah. So. Well, no, this is true, right? So it's this transition, and you know, for me, it's like, it's becoming really apparent. I'm like, oh man, okay, you can stay on top of quite a bit of this stuff, But there's some things that just, I don't care about, right? So like TikTok, for example, is one of those things I'm just not going to do. You know, it's like everybody's doing it. People are making millions of dollars TikToking. What's the difference between that and an Instagram story? I still not really sure, but like, I'm not going to do that, you know? And like, we've reached this point
of oldness,
and but it's not. And so this is the point that I'm getting to, is that it's not about age being a limiting factor, right? It's not that you don't possess the faculties to do this. It's that the oscillations, like the borders, the amplitude of the oscillations you're willing to deal with are constrained by the time that you were born in. And I think that that's like, what's up? That's generational changes, right? I mean, that's the difference between Gen X's and millennials, and, you know, boomers and Gen Y's,
and then everybody.
And everybody. Well, except for whoever was before them, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of the thing that I think occurs, is we're just like, we're somewhat constrained to these bands of capacity, you know? And every generation it changes a little bit, but then you see these significant leaps, like between boomers and Gen Zs,
right?
Or X, Y, whatever.
Well, all of the above, yeah.
You know, like it's dramatically different, right? And these people exist. These people are grandparents and grandchildren, right? They exist in the same world, and so it's a trip. You know, it's just a trip to think about, and to be old enough to have like watched it really like happen, you know, for myself, and to be able to experience like what's going on with this stuff.
Well, that's why it's so important that we die. And it's like really trippy, because we're kind of like, because we have like a max capacity, right? Or a max ability to change. And so this is why death is so important, right? We have to make room for the new frequencies to move forward. And that way you do that by literally getting out of the way.
You get out of the way. Yeah. And so there's a really, really beautiful cycle to the whole thing, right?
There is.
And like we got to witness that with Penelope, you know, as she got older and older and older, there were things, it's not that she became less endearing, right? That wasn't the case, but there was a little bit less connection, a little bit less interaction, a little bit, you know, it's like she prepared us for her to go. And we see the exact same thing happen with humans, right?
Yeah.
You hit this point, because it's not that you were born and the constraints of your, you know, the amplitude that you're able to carry into this world. It's not like as you get older, you even want to do it. And you're like, oh no, I'm slipping. I'm fading. You're like, fuck this. Get off my lawn. You know what I mean? Like that's the attitude. You get to this point where you're like, all right, to hell with this. You know, get these kids out of here.
Adam's
you know,
clearly acting.
No, but you see it, right?
Totally.
Like it's the curmudgeonly, grumpy old, you know, woman that lives in a shoe.
Yeah, for sure.
She's over this shit. She's done with it, and it's time to move on, you know? And so it's like the whole thing works. And, you know, I mean, yeah, when you're, you know, you've got an older elderly family member and they do pass away, it's sad and you miss them and all of those things. But if it wasn't some sort of, you know, catastrophic accident, like a vehicle accident or something like that, almost everybody could say, yeah, you know, they had a good life. It was time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how this whole thing works, right? You like just run it to the end, and then it's like, yeah, it's time.
Yeah. By the grace of God, you get to make it to that point, right? And then you kind of get to sail off into the sunset. This is the interesting thing about, you know, being able to upload your personality, or you know, this idea of
the singularity. Or, well, I mean, not the singularity, but you know, singularity
theory.
Like Singularity University's work, right? Kurzweil, Ray Kurzweil.
So it's kind of like this interesting thing where you're like, but do we really want to upload your consciousness, or does that consciousness need to pass so that a new consciousness can come forward and we can have this, you know, escalation of energy and frequency? And I think it starts to get into really dangerous territory when every soul wants to stay here and be here and hang on and be attached to this earth experience. Yeah. I don't know, man.
So this is getting into something that I think is super interesting, like theoretical metaphysics, right? Which, is there any other kind? So this idea that, that we come So let's just, I mean, there's no way to ever know any of this stuff, right? Hopefully when we die, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, and you have, I think we've talked about this before, like, hopefully there's like a moment of shared consciousness between the questions you had as an earthly being and whatever comes next, where you're like, oh shit, you know, and it's not just bloop and switch flipped. And you're like,
and you don't have, what was I?
What was I doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, oh man, like I hope it's not like that, because it would be cool to just have like even like a 5-minute Q&A, you know, like how did all of this stuff go? So, but let's just lay like for the rest of this conversation, let's just lay like some assumptions, right? So like if this was a spreadsheet, there's an entire tab that's set up for this.
Let's bring it back to the Piscean era.
Well, this is where I'm stuck, right?
I know,
like these are the confines of, these are the oscillations I'm comfortable with.
Okay, let's do it. A spreadsheet it is.
There's a spreadsheet, and there's an entire page of that spreadsheet that is assumptions. So like anytime you're like, what the fuck does this mean? You go back to the assumptions, you're like, oh, okay. So we were assuming X, Y, and Z, and that's where we got this result. So the assumptions here is that there is a collective consciousness that we all dropped from, one way or the other. What was that animated cartoon that really nailed it? Oh,
Soul. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's assume it's Soul. Yeah. And the crazy dude dancing with a pickle on the corner is like, or the sign is like tapped in at a really high level, which is a fantastic part of that show. But so just assuming that that's what's up. And if that's not what you believe, just suspend belief for a moment, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to move forward in what we're going to be talking about, right? So there's this collective consciousness or an ether or a source of souls, right? You know, for lack of a better term, or whatever that is, these little droplets of it show up here on Earth. And when they get here, they're confined to the physics of this realm, right? Which includes time. And time being linear is, I'm pretty sure everyone agrees on this, that time being linear is really our interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with actual space and time. This is how we experience it, right?
Right.
And so if you can get your head around that one, you know, it's a really good start. But it's also necessary to have any sort of useful understanding of the Akashic Records and like how this whole thing could go down, right? And so if that's the deal, if we've dropped in here into this existence, you know, as this little piece of infinite consciousness to experience time, maybe not that's the only reason we're here, but we happen to be experiencing time while we're here, then there's this realm or field or records of everything that has happened and is going to happen, because it has and going to don't exist outside of our world, right? It's like it's like gravity. There's no beginning and end to gravity, right? Gravity's just, it's a thing. It affects everything, but there's no beginning and end of it, right? I mean, as far as I can tell, you know? So with all of that, like how do you talk about the Akashic Records? Like what's the deal?
Are we still on the spreadsheet?
No, I'm just saying the spreadsheet was just about the assumptions, which we'll tap back into. Okay. The assumptions, so far, the assumptions that we've established are that there is an infinite consciousness, and that here, the human experience is one of linear time, but that doesn't exist elsewhere.
Right. Got it. Well, you know, I think the way that I think about the Akashic Records is like a realm. So if you were to think about, you know, Earth being a realm, it's a realm of experience. It's a realm of energy, right? So like this is a place where you're getting an experience, you're getting information, you're getting stuff happening. Mm-hmm. And this is a realm of Earth experience. And the way that I think about the Akashic Records is that it's a realm of infinite knowledge. It's a realm of your soul's history, of your soul's energy, of your soul's, because we had just established time is not linear, of really all of the infinite possibility for your soul. And I think that it's really kind of hard to think about that possibility if you don't make some assumptions like time is not actually linear anywhere else, or that's just the way humans experience in our human physical form. Because then when you put that aside, then there becomes a possibility that there can be just a container of energy. Mm-hmm. And then you think, okay, well, if there can be a container of energy that does not have linear time associated with it, what kinds of containers of energy could we have? What possibility of sort of containers would be out there? And I think that if you can just kind of assume or imagine that there could potentially be a container of information about life itself, about experience, then we're getting really close to an understanding of the Akashic field.
Mm-hmm. So in that field, this would be, so to just to sort of put it into other parlance, right? Like is it the same thing as like collective consciousness?
You know, that's actually a really good question, and it's a good distinction. I don't think of it as collective consciousness, actually. I think of it as the raw material that can help feed consciousness, that can help support thought and consciousness and frequency, but I don't think of it as the realm of collective consciousness. I think that's more once we are in soul form, or in some kind of form where there is a collective, that energy sphere is built around that. But I think of the Akashic Records as something specific and unique in its nature. And I don't think you can affect the Akashic Records. So this is probably a good way to think of it, is the Akashic Records, I think, should be a one-way street, right? Where the Akashic Records is feeding down into you and you're receiving as
some kind of like destiny-based thing.
Yeah, and also like when you tap into it, you should be receiving information, not necessarily like imprinting your information up there. Like it kind of should be a one-way street, if you will. Okay. So all downloads, no uploads. Yeah, and it's like, you know, you can do healings to your Akashic Records, and you can maybe even look at some of the soul contracts that are held there and some of the things that you've written into what into the Akashic field. But as a reader, you don't want to be imprinting your spirit, your soul, your energy up into the cloud, so to speak. Mm-hmm. You're mostly just there to pull down the information and help make it usable for people. So I forget how this all began. Well,
we were trying to develop a distinction between the Akashic Records and collective consciousness.
Yeah. So collective consciousness would feel more like a give and take, right? Like an exchange, like a deposit withdrawal. You're almost
like karma or something falls into that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it's kind of more like this circulatory system where we're all exchanging information all the time. And I feel like the Akashic Records is sort of a field that is a bit set away from all of that. And, a lot of this is hard to describe because it's just my interpretation and the way it occurs to me. Yeah. Right. Because it's just like any of this stuff that isn't tangible, that we can't go visit. You can't say, oh, no, the building's pink, not blue. Right. So, this is the way that it occurs for me as someone who's making an effort to connect with it, making an effort to look at it and understand it and work with it. And so I think of the records really as a way to go in and look into your soul's energy imprint, look into what's going on with it, and get information that could be helpful and useful to you that could in turn affect your collective, or what you give the collective conscious, but it's a different realm to me.
Different things.
Yeah.
So to quote Kim Bud. So. Okay, so maybe it would be helpful to talk about like Like, so what would you want? What would a person want to do outside of just like having your palm read type of thing, right? Like, why would someone want to access or well, either work on creating their own access, right, or honing their own access, or work with someone like you to kind of read what's going on in their records? Like,
yeah,
why would they do that?
Yeah, totally. Good question. So one of the things that I think about that I think is kind of a boots on the ground example that's helpful is if someone, say someone's going through something emotional, or they're going through even something physical and they need healing.
Like hunger.
Yes, you can download a hamburger. Hold on, let me tap into the Akashic cheeseburger and fries.
Medium rare? Gluten-free bun. Got it.
Got it. Your soul is saying that it wants to bring you a burger. No, it's great. I love that we're making light of it too, because it should be fun. It should be playful. And it's like, I think this is part of the problem with this stuff, is that it gets so serious that it feels too hard for people to want to tap into it, because they're like, I don't think I'm doing it right, or I'm not spiritual enough, or I'm not whatever. But it's like, this is access for all of us. All of us really can do this stuff. It's just about training it. It's just about learning some of the ropes so that you can make it usable. But back to my example, I think that, say you've gone through a heartbreak and you need healing. I mean, people go and visit Reiki healers. They visit energy workers. They visit people that can help them move through things. And I think that the thing I love about the Akashic Records is that you can open the records for the person, or they can open it for themselves if they're trained and feel comfortable doing it. And you can actually ask the records, like, what would be supportive for me in this moment to heal this heartbreak? Like, what can what codes, what frequencies can I download in this moment? I mean, when I'm doing healings, I was doing one this morning, and I get sound current, I might get like a specific sound that this person might need to hear. I get a specific song that might be helpful. I work a lot with my smudging fan and moving energy. So I might work on more like of a Reiki sort of lens with people and moving frequencies and moving energy through their body. I'll see a chakra that needs like specific work. And sometimes I can go into the chakra and I can see a little corner of it that just needs to be cleared out. So what I love about the Akashic Records, it's like, it's not just one modality. So like, say you go to an acupuncturist and they do acupuncture, and whether or not the moment calls for acupuncture, that's the mode of healing you're going to receive. Whereas the Akashic Records, you go in and we say, what can help this person move this energy? What can help heal this pain? What can help heal this trauma? What can we download into their field that will make a difference for them? And this is why, out of all the things I've done, and I've done a lot of things, I've been doing Reiki since I was 16. I've been in this field for a long time. I mean, there's things that come down from the Akashic Records that I'm literally like, really? Really? You want me to do that? Really? I'm going to chirp like a bird into their second chakra? Like, okay, let's do it. And so, and again, back to that lightness of being, because it's silly and it can be funny, but you feel the change. You feel the frequencies move. And the people that I'm working with get a healing. I get a healing. Everyone gets a healing, because you're attached to this higher realm of frequency that's feeding you just this ultimate, beautiful information and support. And so I think that is what, to me, differentiates that as a modality, as a way of working with your life, working with clients, that is different than anything else I've done.
Yeah.
And by the way, and I've shared this on the, I hosted a little ceremony last weekend, just kind of giving people a taste of the Akashic Records and just kind of tuning into some of the things that we would look at in the Akashic training. And the Kundalini training that I've been doing Kundalini for 6 or 7 years now. And just this year I became a teacher, and I've done 3 teacher trainings now. I've just really stepped up my game into being able to pull that energy and that technology in for people. a lot of that information was said to be downloaded from the Akashic field. So this is a perfect example. And you'll see the little cross section I'm going to make here. And I just made that joke about, you know, singing like a bird into the second chakra. It's like this ridiculous thing, but somehow it came through as the thing to do. Well, look at Kundalini. It's the most ridiculous yoga you've ever done.
Thing you've ever done. Yeah.
And somehow afterwards, after, you know, 7 hattas, patting your stomach and bouncing on your chair, you're like, damn, I feel really good.
Something is up here.
Something is up. Something has changed in the force field. So, you know, a lot of times you're downloading this technology from the Akashic Records, and it's for that person in that moment. It's their own Kundalini. It's their own frequency that needs to be, you know, processed in their auric field or whatever it is. And it's just really, really high level stuff.
Yeah. Something's up. So on the Kundalini, not to, you know, deviate too much on this, but on the Kundalini front, it's really interesting to me, this whole idea, right? That there's, I mean, we kind of in the lineage that's familiar to us. I mean, there's like 3 guys, right? I mean, it's not that far back, right? That have sort of been downloading this stuff, and it is super odd, like, you know, and it's all just very, very bizarre stuff. And what I've found from practicing it is that there's 100% a difference depending on who is leading the class, right? So you can do the exact same set with somebody leading, and they open a bigger hole, you know, a bigger portal into whatever's going on, and you get a really otherworldly experience out of what is arguably the exact same physical thing, you know, that you may have done a week earlier with someone else. And I just don't know, like, I don't know what to make of that, right? As a thing, right? So when you're practicing this stuff, it's like, it's really easy to get sort of roped into some sort of like guru following thing. 'Cause you're like, oh, this is every time I go to this person's class, I get the real major download situation, right? And so since this stuff, because you hear them talk about it all the time, you know, that this stuff it was essentially downloaded not that long ago, 700 years ago or something like that, right? And then you know. So what's the deal? Like, why? What's going on with that? Is it really, like, from your perspective? Obviously, it's like how is it that somebody can hold that space or create an energy or project something and I mean, I'm talking about like over Zoom. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to be in someone's presence, right? We've all been around really powerful people. Over Zoom, like. What the hell is going on? Like, why is it that sometimes you can get into this really crazy situation and other times you're just kind of doing weird yoga?
Well, I mean, the way that my teachers talk about it and the way that resonates to me as being really true is that there is a lineage in Kundalini yoga. And so who your teacher was, who your teacher's teacher was, how they received the technology, how they can hold the frequency itself, right? Because it's powerful technology. So if you're not the kind of person who's working on your own energetic body, so say you're a yoga teacher, but 5 nights a week you're out partying and you're, you know, making bad decisions and your own energy field is depleted. And I'm not saying, you know, that's not a judgment. I'm just saying that your frequency, your field of energy is depressed. How are you going to hold these big frequencies and project them for your students? How are you going to create an experience if you can't hold the technology yourself? So I think a lot of it has to do with your teacher's teacher, how well they held the technology, how they passed it down, how they, you know, amplified it and contained it in their own auric field and passed it down to their teachers. And I really believe the reason that I didn't become a teacher until now is because I hadn't found who was supposed to be my teacher.
Right.
And that was why, because I've been saying for years that I wanted to become a Kundalini teacher.
Yeah, it's like every 6 months for 5-6 years.
Yeah.
I want to take teacher training.
But it wasn't until my lineage came and
Right.
I knew that was my lineage and it was my time. And I think that I was just on our good friend Kelly Tennant's podcast the other day, and she was talking about doing a class, and she was like, that yoga class it just was not for me. It didn't feel good, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying the same thing to her, that the lineage matters, like who your teachers were, how they held the technology, who taught you. And I feel like I just got blessed enough to step into a lineage that is super high powered and has held the technology really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I think what you're talking about is that if you're having an experience with a teacher, they just they're not holding the auric field of it as well. They don't have it to hold, whether it was because their teachers didn't pass it down to them as powerfully, or they themselves aren't embodying it powerfully enough to give it in a way that it can be received in that way.
Right.
And that, it sounds kind of snotty a little bit, like, oh, your teachers were not high powered enough or whatever. But
you got some low powered teachers.
But at some point, we do have to recognize that, like, the quality of your projection does depend on the quality of your energetic field.
Yeah, there's levels to all of this shit. Like we are living in what I think is going to be a very short-lived fiction of equality. Because it just doesn't exist. I mean, you can have equality of opportunity in some sort of, political, economic viewpoint, but there is no equality in people. Like everyone is different, and everyone has their pros and cons for lack of a better term. So. Yeah, to me, it seems pretty clear that like some people have got it and some people don't, and it doesn't mean that you can't get it. But if you don't have it, you don't have it until you get it.
Yeah, and I would say one of the important things to note here, because I really see this cross section and this synergy for me, and the fact that my Kundalini practice took a major uptick as far as my training and my commitment to it. I also haven't drank alcohol in over a year now. A year and plus change, something.
I don't know. What is like 1.5?
Yeah. And so I give all of this because I really believe that it has changed my frequency. Alcohol, it wasn't really a problem. It wasn't really a thing, but we just decided to take a year off last, whatever it was, December. And 2 Decembers ago, and just see. Yeah. And it was like, after a few months, I was like, probably not going to do that really anymore. Yeah. It just wasn't.
Yeah, it's just not a thing.
It just left the energetic field. And this is what I'm talking about when you are looking for the teachers that can hold things. It's because they're cleaning out their body, their auric field, their presence, so that they can hold these things. And so it's not a coincidence to me that I would have been attracted to going deeper into my Kundalini practice, and that I would have got my own Akashic prayer at that same time. And just to back up, your Akashic prayer is how you access the records. It's how you gain permission or access into the field of consciousness that is the Akashic Records. And I was given my teacher's prayer, and that's how I accessed it. And then again, right as I started ramping up my Kundalini practice, I did my teacher training. I did all of the stuff, coupled with the sobriety and the deep
crystals.
The crystals. I mean, let's not forget the crystals, for God's sakes. But I was given my own prayer, and that was basically, I went into the Akashic Records, and they said, okay, it's time for you to be a teacher. It's time for you to pass on. So what essentially they're saying to me is that you're part of the lineage now. Like you're part of one of the holders of the technology. And now it's your responsibility to pass it forward. Yeah.
So I just realized the timing of something with all this. So all of this started, you've been in this stuff for a long time, right? But we've always been as a business and as a outward facing sort of caricature.
Yeah.
Vanessa has always been a little more health and fitnessy, right? With the side of self-help stuff. And then you got that big alien head crystal in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
Last February.
Yep.
And it was literally a month later. Well, so yeah, then lockdown, right, on all of this stuff. But that weird alien head crystal over there, is like the
catalyst
impetus or the catalyst. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's totally true. I believe that. And I say this all the time, that we have soul contracts with certain crystals and they come into us when we're ready to embody certain frequencies and technologies.
So, I mean, this is like, how many sci-fi movies have started this way, right? Like there's a meteor, boom, and then the kid goes and picks it up and puts it in his closet, and then everything changes, you know?
Where do you think this stuff comes from, though? Yeah. I mean, this is people downloading the frequencies of reality, and they make movies out of it because it's like, it's such good material.
It's good, it's good content.
But it's like, because, you know, I always say truth is better than fiction, because any movie that is like amazing usually is based somewhat on some kind of true story,
or it ends up being true. Right? That's the weird one.
Well, because it's like, you know, the veil is very thin. If it's in the consciousness, it's in the collective, then like really it's real in some way. Whether or not we experience it as real is a question. But yeah, I mean, this alien head. And I saw this alien head in Joshua Tree Rock Shop, and I was just like, and we say it looks like
mine.
We say it's an alien head because it looks like an alien head. It has this green amazonite eye
of Sauron.
Yeah, and it has like a smoky quartz brow. Honestly, like how you feel when you see someone, like a long lost friend that you thought you would never see before, again. You're like,
Forgot about you.
And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I need this. So actually, and it was kind of expensive. So I actually had to like ask the owner if he would like let me make payments on it and like do a whole thing. But yeah, now it's with me. And I agree with you. The crystals, there's all of it is coming together because there's a cosmic circuitry, you know, there's just like, there's an electric.
It's like a big Plinko game.
Exactly.
it's all plinking its way down towards something that, you know, makes sense.
Exactly. So anyway, I mean, it's not a surprise to me that all of this is coming together, and that it's just honestly my time to step into giving forward, projecting forward all of the stuff that I've been able to gather throughout this lifetime. And, you know, I'm 42 years old, so who knows how long I'll live, but, you know, this next chapter of my life has to be about giving forward the technology. I've been gathering it for a long time. Yeah. And it's time for me to pay it forward.
Isn't 42 like the number of the universe too, right?
Wasn't
that? Yeah.
Oh,
like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like at the end of the entire thing, the entire point was the number 42.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
So
I just skipped right past that one. 42. I don't even remember 42.
Well, and I also will say that it's no coincidence that we moved to Jackson Hole. I mean, all of this stuff is really pretty cosmic if you think about it. As soon as we got here, we started watching this documentary that talked about the Kundalini energy is actually very, very powerful here in the Rockies.
Well, yeah, it was talking about all of these different, like all of the portals and vortexes and all of the stuff that everybody talks about on the Earth, right? So like Göbekli Tepe and the pyramids and Mount Shasta and, you know, like all of these different spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they mapped it all out. And of course, you know, if you put enough dots on a map, you can make it into whatever. You're like, oh, it's a smiley face. You're like, no, it's a snake. You're like, that must be the Kundalini snake. But the tail of the Kundalini snake ran basically right through this, you know, particular part of the kind of southeastern Rockies, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So we're here now, and we weren't there before.
But I mean, you start to just look at it. It's like, obviously, it's all anecdotal because you can't really prove any of this stuff, you know.
You're using that word right.
Oh, I know. I use it right all the time. That's a side conversation. But I believe it's all coming together at this time for a reason, and there's a reason that the energy is picking up, and the call for people to bring crystals into their home. We're all feeling this on some level, whether it's just, wow, I'm really attracted to that smoky quartz, And I just feel like I should have it with me I think I need to learn how to read the Akashic Records and start actually downloading these frequencies to help myself and others.
Right.
But it's here. The energy's here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely something going on. Like there just is, man. I mean, and even Google will tell you, right? Like the Google Analytics, or what is it when you look up where it's like what's trending on Google?
Yeah.
I mean, it is Google Analytics.
Like the AdWords or whatever?
No, it's just, well, anyway, whatever. But Amethyst Crystals.
Yeah.
Skyrocketing on Google. It's a trip. Like ready. In the last 18 months.
Yeah. There's a huge consciousness shift right now. And it's, people might say like, oh, it's just a trend or a fad or whatever, but there's something really powerful about crystal. I mean, they've been using clear quartz to transmit energy for a really long time. I mean, they use it in record players or like watches. Yeah,
it's all over the place. Yeah.
They use it in like computer chips.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not like actually that crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are physical properties of crystal quartz or quartz crystal or whatever that have like legitimate uses today. Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you just kind of, you kind of blow out that idea and you're like, okay, it's a conductor of energy. It's a holder of energy. It can help.
It's a little capacitor.
It's a capacitor. Yeah. And that truly is, I mean, and that's what the hippies say too. That clear quartz is a capacitor. Yeah. You can tune it to the kind of frequencies,
the hippies,
the hippies, them. You can tune it to the kind of frequencies that you want to hold. You can tune it to the kind of frequencies you want to pull in. And if you want to know more about this, come to one of my full moon parties because we talk about this stuff every month.
Talk about it and get it all mapped out.
We do, yeah. And in the end, it's just beautiful too. It's a beautiful way to live your life, to dance with this reality that we're in, And I think that's the other thing is that so many of us are looking for new ways of being and creating, and the old ways we know are not working for us. We're not healthy. We're not happy. We're not blossoming. And if we are going to look at these new paradigms and these new ways of being, it's good to get an education about it. It's good to like get some constructs of how to work with it all. And I think that's where the Akashic Records can be really, really amazing, is that you're getting an education on kind of how to work in these other realms. Yeah.
And you can have an experience of it. I mean, that's and that's been the thing that I've found really interesting with Kundalini specifically, is that you don't have to, there's like no belief required, right? It's like, just try it and you'll either have the experience or you won't. And if you have the experience and you keep coming back, you'll probably continue to have a deeper and deeper experience. And that's it. And it doesn't have to mean anything beyond that, And I think that that's one of the things that's really interesting and somewhat counterintuitive about the Akashic Records, is that on the surface, it sounds like probably the most esoteric, airy-fairy like thing that you could think of. Oh, there's just a massive pool of information that can be accessed in the cosmos about everything about you that's ever happened and what might happen in the future, and you can just pull it down and use it to advise your life. Super straightforward. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds really, really far out there, but in practice, all it takes is being open to the idea and then receiving whatever useful information that you get out of it. And like, that's an experience. You're experiencing whether or not this was like useful, and that, I think as like a metric, I mean, this is how I advise people on supplements. Right. Take it. Do you feel better? No, stop taking it. Right. You know what I mean? Right. Or test, retest, right? But like, a lot of it has to do with your experience of it, right? And I mean, and we see this, like vitamin B is a perfect example. You can have solid serum levels of vitamin B, but when you take the supplement, you feel better. Yeah. So who do you believe? Your personal experience or the lab test, right? And so it's about just being open enough to receive the experience and then make a decision about it, and not, it's almost like I'm telling myself this, right? And not, being like, that's bullshit. And then never having the experience of it because you're completely closed off to the whole thing. Right. Yeah. So Yeah.
You know, actually, so I have a question for you. What is the thing, what do you think makes people closed off to it? Like, I know there's this like, oh, you can't prove it or whatever, but like, what's behind that? Because there's a lot of things that you can't prove that people are still like, oh yeah, but I still believe that because it works. Or like, what do you think that sort of knee-jerk reaction to not believing things that are outside of people's realm is?
Well, I think there's a few things, you know, and so for me in particular, it's like I have I have like a really deep-seated fear of looking dumb, right? And like I just don't, and I think everyone does, right? I mean, this is like Landmark 101, right? They're like, fear of looking bad and wanting to look good, like that's what drives everything, right? And so I think that there's some of that, right? Like nobody wants to feel like they got fooled by some woo-woo stuff. And there's, on the opposite side of that, there's a whole group of people who want to have the gotcha.
Yeah.
I knew this wasn't right, right? And so like with that dynamic, in that dynamic is created this like nervousness about like which side of the fence are you on? Are you the person who, you know, normally wants to say gotcha and called bullshit on that? Oh, I knew that wasn't going to work out, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Well, what do you, okay, so here's my question though. Just what do you think's behind that mentality? Is that still just not wanting, like, what is that?
I think at the root of it, it's people don't want to look dumb.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like that's really what's going on. And so if you peel that back a layer farther, you know, fear of rejection, you know, there's all of that kind of stuff that kind of, you know, could work its way all the way back in there, you know, and like at the root of it all is the denial of death for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Nobody wants to pretend like they're going to die.
Yep.
And so all of this stuff that appears to be out of their control, all of that, everything that is outside of themselves and that, and their ability to rationalize their purpose in life, you know, threatens that, right? So at the like very, very, very bottom level.
Yeah.
that's
afraid
what's
of
going
dying.
on. You know, we are blessed with the knowledge that we are only here for a short period of time and we have no idea what that means. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of it, like that's what's really down there, I think. But like in the practicality of it all, I think that there's just, you know, it's social conditioning. It's what you've learned and hold true. Right. So like, I think religion and science play a really big role in that too. So if you grew up religious, then the idea that something's 7,000 years old might completely freak you the fuck out, right? And shake your worldview. The idea that you could access the infinite knowledge of the collective consciousness without going through a priest to talk to God could really rattle you and make you skeptical, or like, you know, it threatens your worldview, right?
Right.
If you're a scientist, the fact that there's, you know, things that we have not been able to explain yet through the scientific method, that spirituality and spirituality, I guess, for lack of a better kind of global term, has like a reasonable explanation for, but it's unprovable through the scientific method. Like that shakes your whole thing, right? Because and not everybody, you know, in fact, Brian Greene is a physicist and atheist, you know, who kind of talks about some of this stuff. He, in an interview, it's either in an interview or in his book, because I got it was a audio book, so it was him talking, but I don't know, it might have been his book or might have been in an interview. He was talking about being at this convention with a lot of theoretical and experimental physicists, right? So there was like all of his peers, his contemporaries, and he was surprised by the number of them who were religious, who were not atheists. And he was like, how, knowing everything that you know about how this whole thing works, how can you believe in a creator when we know that that's not how it happened, right? And he was saying that he was just shocked by how many people kind of held these dual beliefs. And he just shared this story that, you know, he asked one of these guys, and I can't remember who it was, but some, you know, incredibly well-respected physicist. And he said, how do you reconcile these two things? And he said, the guy just like laughed and put his arm around him and said, you just give it time, you know? And I was like, it's interesting because it's actually The End of Time was the book. And so there's something about that, right? There's this sense of where you are in your life, you know, and like the things that you're trying to do. So if you are a theoretical physicist and you're trying to, your entire life revolves around grant funding, right? And so you're trying to write good papers to get good grants to do, and when you're writing good papers, you're opening yourself up to peer review, the scrutiny of all of these nitpicky fuckers that are doing the exact same thing that you're doing, competing for the same grants, right? So talk about like feeling exposed if you have a different idea about how things work, right? So at the root of it, it comes down to some shaking of the world view that keeps you on the straight and narrow of life, one way or the other. You know, and like that's what is being threatened by these ideas. And then there's some externality of that, you know, that might be just super dismissive or downright confrontational or whatever. But at the, you know, at the root of it, it's either you've hit a nerve and so people are reacting to that, or you know, just some level of aloofness that people are just dismissive, you know, don't really care about the whole thing. But if you got somebody who was dismissive and aloof and you pinned them down and you peeled the onion, you'd land at like, this fucks with my worldview. You know?
Yeah, no, totally. And it's interesting because I think that that's another thing that shifted for me this year is that, you know, I've always had this stuff going on. This has always been like part of who I am, these teachings or these philosophies or these, you know, wanting to learn and go in these directions, but having the same exact feeling like, oh, if I do this, people will make fun of me or they won't take me seriously as a coach, or that, you know, this will delegitimize the other things I'm saying, because then it'll be like, oh yeah, but she also believes in, you know, the crystals have power or whatever. And
her
I will
fairy godmother.
Exactly. But this is actually something really cool and something I would just share with people out there that have that feeling, is that when you start working in the Kundalini energy, when you start working in the Akashic records, you build the energetic field that is not as bothered by those fears.
Yeah.
And that is something that has been one of the coolest surprises to me, is that it's not that any of those things aren't still true, that people might still think those things about me, or any of those things might still occur. It's that my energetic body is not hit by it. Yeah. So like where it might have just come and got me right in the gut and threw my whole system off and made me spin out so much that it pushed me back away from wanting to share more, talk more, teach more. It doesn't have the penetration value that it used to. And so like my auric field, my energetic body is just out far enough that it just doesn't hit me. It doesn't have the same impact that it might have before. And that's what I would just share with someone out there who's kind of like, oh yeah, but you know, this makes I'm worried people think I'm stupid, or they'll think I'm this or that. You just kind of, it stops hitting you really as hard. Right. You're like, yeah, people are going to,
well, and whatever. They will. So that's the other thing that I think is, you know, pretty, well, maybe we have a unique circumstance, because we've established that we have a relatively unique group of friends. but you know, people are like, oh, okay, so you're straight up communicating with aliens now. yeah, that's what's up. Okay,
cool.
And then like the next day, it's like, all right, so this is what's up, you know. And I think that's, you know, there's a real tendency for us to, I mean, and it's deep-seated stuff, you know. It's like fear of being ostracized from the group is like right up there with fear of snakes when it comes to like a lower brainstem thing, right? I mean,
totally.
We don't survive without the group, you know. So that's a really, really deep fear, And it's not it's a legitimate one, you know?
Not to mention, I mean, we've literally been persecuted. I mean,
well, so that's where I was just going with this.
Yeah.
So there was a time when you really probably wanted to be a little sketchy or, you know, be cautious about this shit, or you're going to get burned at the stake.
100%.
You know?
And that stuff is not that far away. It's still in the DNA. I mean, it's still affecting, even if you look at it from just a physiology perspective. It's
the
still,
morphic resonance idea is 100%.
Yeah. And then if you look at it from a cosmic place where it's like, okay, that's still in the force field, like it's everywhere imprinted. And so you kind of just have to go, the fear is really real. And I think about that sometimes it's funny being here in Wyoming. I was like, I mean, could I get in trouble for this stuff? Like, I don't know. Like, what is there a witch hunt still happening here? Because, you know, it's a little bit different than our California. Where you're like, you can pretty much get away with.
You're never going to be the weirdest person.
Yeah, exactly.
You can certainly be the weirdest person in Wyoming.
You can,
like, it's possible.
It might have happened. But, you know, I just think that those fears are they're well-founded and they're deep-seated.
Yeah.
They're primal in us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and all of this to say that, you know, you're not alone. It's not like, you know, this is the deal. If you're into stuff that people around you aren't super into, this is the same thing that's going to happen. It's just less, I mean, think about it like sports teams, you know, it's like you'll get some really sort of, you know, outrageous behavior between human beings who one of them likes the Dallas Cowboys and one of them likes the San Francisco 49ers. You know what I mean? And this is like made up shit, made up games, literally playing games, right?
Yeah.
And people get really weird about it. And so it's just human nature to kind of be in that zone. But I think that at the end of the day, you know, what's the life that you're, if you're interested enough in this stuff, then odds are you're with us on the assumptions tab, and that like you've been here before and you might come back if you don't sort your shit out and learn everything that you were supposed to. But when you're here this time, you know, or whatever your version of that is, you know, and so if you're there, if you can get to that point of it, then you should be able to get past the pettiness of, you know, Ford versus Chevy and say, man, you know what? Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but what if my whole freaking purpose this time around was to get uncomfortable with whatever the hell is going on in this iteration when I'm here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, what if that's the whole point?
Right.
You know, and I think that like on a 30,000 foot level, that might be the deal. Like,
yeah.
I'm not convinced that we're here to have a great time. You know, I mean, it's not like you can't have a good time, but you're here to be challenged, you know,
for sure. You're here to grow.
I just really think that's what's up. And yeah. And so this is the chance, you know, it's like, this is one avenue of that growth where you can step outside your comfort zone and step into something that you can have an experience of. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have an experience of it, you take another step into something else. Right. And it doesn't mean anything. Right. You know, and like, that's the real trap that we fall into with stuff is like, oh man, if I do this, then what does that mean about me as a person? It doesn't mean shit. It means you were willing to do something,
to try something,
you know,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
Like that. And unfortunately, like that's not very well received. You know, in a lot of communities, it's like, whoa, that's the person who stepped outside the lines. You know, they're back now, but boy, they stepped out once, you know, and it just sucks that that's true. Yeah. But it doesn't change, you know, the importance of being that person that's willing to do it.
Well, and I will say that I think it's changing. I think there's more and more people who are willing to step outside of the box, who are willing to take a little bit of a chance, because we've realized that the status quo, the way that everybody, the approved way, you know, of doing things isn't necessarily yielding some amazing result that we're like so stoked about, you know? So, and even if you got this kind of training just literally so that you could have another force field around you of something you could call on, something that could help you when you're going through life struggles or when you're going through questioning your next steps. Even if you just had one more layer of support, I mean, it's worth it just for that. It's worth to have the technology, just to have the technology. You know, the training I'm doing, if people want to come out of it and be legitimate Akashic Records readers, they'll be able to do it. That's my whole goal, is that it's a deep dive, and it's actually a bit of a commitment. You know, I want people to feel really, really comfortable and competent in this stuff, because again, one of the reasons we have these knee-jerk reactions of being afraid is that we just don't really know what it is that we're working with.
Right.
And there's a lot of trainings out there that are kind of, you know, drop in the pan, sort of like, oh yeah, here it is. And then you don't know what to do with it. So it's like my commitment to help people understand this stuff to the point that they can use it powerfully in their own life. And if they want to use it with clients, they can do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found interesting about this, because I've had 3 Akashic readings now. One from you, which is really, frankly, it was just hard to buy because you know me better than anyone in the world, right? So you're like, okay, what the Akashic Records is saying, he said, you need to do the dishes. You know, I'm like, I don't know about that, you know?
Yeah, I shouldn't be your reader.
No, I mean, it's just like at the end of the day, especially like a super skeptical person like me, it's like you're just going to shoot holes in all of this shit, you know?
Totally.
And like, I just know that you're an incredibly intuitive person anyway. And so like, yeah, couple that with like knowing me better than I know myself, it's a problematic thing. Not that people should go into this trying to disprove it, but I know that like, that's there no matter what. The first couple of minutes of anything like this, you're like, okay, what's going on here? How do you know, it's like, how much stuff did you look up on my Facebook profile or whatever, right? But in the ones that I've had not from you, I totally forgot where I was going with this. What were we talking about before we dove into this?
We were talking about even if you had the training just for yourself.
Oh, got it. So the differentiation, right, between, and this I've had this happen in all 3 readings, including the one that I got from you, was this like check in to try to understand if you were influencing the information somehow, if you were putting your spin on it, or if you were really truly downloading that info, right? And so I mean, obviously I know, because I wrote the webpage, like this is something that you cover in the training, you know, but maybe just talk about that a little bit, because I think that it's a really interesting outlook on the separation between what's within you and your own intuition and what is being accessed.
Yeah. So it's super important that again, we were talking about this in the beginning, like this should be a one-way street when you are reading for others. So the information should be coming in, and you should be doing your best to interpret what's coming through, but you're not giving your imprint into what's coming through. And so that is really about learning your own boundaries, like being really comfortable with where you end and something else begins. And so that's what we'll really be working on, is how do you really find the end of you, the boundary of you, and set that solidly so you can see what's coming that's outside of you. And you can kind of be in this check and balance consistently, so that if you're ever, you know, and anyone that has done your records, or at least the people that I've worked with, sometimes will stop and will say, wait, let me just make sure this is the records and not me. And you take a moment to reassert that boundary and to redelineate what is me and what is the records. And so it's a practice, and it's a consciousness, and it's just being really clear about setting that boundary so that you're not meshing your emotion, especially if you know someone. You know, if I know you, it's like, oh yeah, I really think the records definitely want you to buy me that jacket.
Yeah.
More shoes. They just say more shoes.
Super clear. I don't know what the deal is. It's just this entire wall of shoes.
Every color.
You make it. I mean, sometimes I can't interpret these things.
It's just the records. What do you want?
Does that mean anything to
you? Exactly. So, you know, you just have to be really clear about making sure that you're setting those boundaries And if ever you're feeling like something isn't coming through to you crystal clear, we practice not making it up. You're not going to sit there and go, oh, I don't really know what this is, or let me just like input whatever I think it might mean.
Yeah. You
stop, you reassess, you resort, and you have to learn. It's like learning a language, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, I was giving a reading this morning, and a woman was asking me about a relationship, and I saw literally in my mind's eye a red flame and a blue flame, red flame and a blue flame. And it's like, to me, what do you make that mean when you see a red flame and a blue flame? And I was like, oh, it's twin flames. Like this is your twin flame, which, you know, you have to know what that means. Like you have to be able to distill this information and make it mean something. So that is part of the practice too, is that we understand. It's like learning a new language. You have to figure out when something comes through in a vision, how do I make it mean something that is clear for them, and that is not me deciding, you know, just making it mean something for myself, but I'm able to distill the information well enough that it means something clearly. And that's the other thing that we really work on, is we talked about this in last weekend's little ceremony, is the clairsentience that you have. Like, what are the types of ways that you receive your clairvoyance? So are you receiving images? I receive images, I receive feeling, I receive auditory cues, and together that gives me a full composition of the message coming through. So that's another part of it, is that we work on building out those sentience so that you can distill the information more powerfully. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just a lot of it's a lot of just getting clear on what things mean, and if they're coming from you or the records, and how to take the information and clearly distill it into something that's real for the person you're reading for. Yeah.
And then what about, like, I mean, because you talked about setting the boundaries, you know, like within the sort of energetic field, right? Mm-hmm. So like the difference between you and the information. But I mean, there's got to be a point here, you know, when you start working with people where, I mean, there's got to be like a scope of practice, right? Like an understanding that at some point this is no longer in your wheelhouse to deal with the things that come up for people, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like, what do you do about that? Like, is there like a network or like a resources sort of thing of like, okay, when things get to a certain extent, you got to refer out, you know, or like, what's totally up with that?
I mean, here's the thing is, like, you might download something that's like, hey, you need professional help, you know, like this isn't a realm that, like, I can say all the hada hada hadas and whisper to your second chakra, but there, you know, and you have to be able to just say that and not expect that you're going to be able to solve all the world's problems. Like, that's just not the case. So, you know, sometimes things come through in, especially with medical issues or things like that. And you have to just say, like, this isn't I can't advise you in this realm. I can offer you, like, hey, here's a great book to read on the subject, but you should consult your doctor about this. Yeah. I mean, you just, you have to be clear on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? So like, and so this is one of the things that I think is unique. I haven't talked to a lot of Akashic Records readers, but I am almost positive that the vast, vast majority do not have the coaching background that you have, right? And not just in the like authentic self stuff and all of that kind of, you know, life coaching component, but on nutrition and fitness and all of this stuff. Like, you have such a steeping in what's appropriate and what's inappropriate from a coaching perspective that, like, people should want that. You know what I mean? Like, people should want that perspective when delving into this incredibly murky world of psychospiritual counseling or reading or whatever this is. Like, man, you could get in hot water, right? And it's
Totally.
You know, and that's the thing that about you that I know is that you just like this stuff it's so second nature to you because you've been doing it for so long that you've just got a wealth of information and experience to pass on to folks from this perspective, you know?
Well, this is what I was saying again about the lineage, right? So like, who are your teachers? Who are giving you the technology makes a huge difference of what you receive and how you receive it. And it's the other point I would make is that this is why the course is 3 months with practice nights every single Wednesday. And it's a deep dive because I don't really think you should just be like, oh yeah, okay, so you're gonna get in the car, turn on the engine, you're gonna drive around a circle in the parking lot, and then you've got your license, you're good
to go. Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I've never been on a freeway. I've never had that many passengers. I've never had to avoid an accident. Like, you know, we want to go through some scenarios. We want to go through some stuff together so that you really have you know, your bearings on how to navigate all this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really important, you know, because as someone, so going back to like the very first time that I ever had a tarot card reading.
Did my mom give it to you?
No. Oh. It was the lady that did your psychic school.
Oh, yeah. Margaret. Oh, no, Mary Kay. Margaret?
The older one.
Margaret. Yeah.
So going through this thing, and I mean, whatever. Like I actually, you know what? My mom read tarot cards. So like I was familiar with the concept, right? But I'd never like gone in and had like a whole thing. And, you know, it's like arguably that's like Akashic Records 0.1. You know what I mean? Like from a somebody's flipping over cards and they're saying, well, what does this card mean about you? Right. And in the Akashic Records, it's like potentially a little bit more direct, right, as to like what's going on there. And from one of the things that I took away from that reading that stuck with me for like a really long time was, well, you're always going to make a little bit of money, but you'll never be wealthy. Right. Yeah. And it's like, you know, so genetically I'm predisposed to placebo. Like I identified that from my, you know, from my genes. And so like when somebody, when that gets implanted in you as like, oh, well, yeah, you're just never going to make a lot of money. You know what I mean? And in my mind, I'm like, well, shit, that sucks. Yeah. You know? And like that sticks with you for a really long time. Totally. And I had to do like a considerable amount of work to try to unwind that whole thing. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so I imagine that there's this really strange position that you get put in where there's information coming down. And you're like, I don't know if I should tell you this. Yeah. You know? No. Like, how do you navigate that?
Such a good question. I'm so glad we're talking about this. So one of the things that, you know, I think about always is do no harm. Do no harm. And that means that you are not allowed to harm that person's potential, their psyche, their anything. Everything that we're doing is for support. And everything that should be coming down is held in the essence. And this is the opening prayer that we do in the Akashic Record. All is held in the essence of protection. All is held in a flow of love. All is held with divine guidance to support you and not to hinder you or hurt you in any way. And this is really, really important, is that everything coming through is for your betterment, for your protection, for your love, for your upliftment. And the Akashic Records, you know, the thing about life in general is that there's just energy that's held in a certain way at that time, in that moment. And there's a certain frequency, and that doesn't mean that it can't change in the next moment. Right. In the next moment, there's new energy, and there's new current, and there's new frequency. So to tell somebody to take some information and say, you're never going to be wealthy, you're never going to make money, you don't know that. Yeah. Because there's just like, this is an ever-changing thing. And so everything that we are distilling down is for the betterment of that human. And that is like the way that I'm holding the technology, the way I'm teaching the technology. We're not going around saying to people like, oh, you're never going to be successful, or you're never going to be this, don't try. You don't know that. Yeah. And even if energy is occurring to you in a certain way, then the way that we distill that is like, wow, you might want to, look at this area of your life because you could pull up some frequency around this if this is something you're interested in creating more of. Instead of saying to you, like, you're never going to be wealthy, it's like, oh, if that's a goal of yours and you want to move frequency in that direction,
then you need to do something.
Yeah, then do something to help move frequency in that direction, because that's important to you and you want to pull that in. And so to negate somebody's potential, it's just, to me, this is again why I love the Akashic Records. It's like all possibility exists.
Right.
We're just downloading whatever can be supportive in that moment. And that's my commitment to how I'm working with it and how I'm pulling it through.
Well, and that's the difference between a coach and a translator. You know what I mean? So like a translator is going to take this language and repeat it.
Right.
And a coach is going to take what that meaning could be and work with the direction and the goals of the person that they're working with to achieve a better outcome.
Yeah. And I do want to delineate that, like, yes, you're right. But also I am pulling the information down as it is, and I'm not shifting it for you, but I'm going to set the container as that everything we're receiving is for the betterment of this person. So like everything that we're holding is held in a structure and an intention of this being powerful and positive and loving and vibrant for this person. So I think that the important thing, more than me being a coach, is that I am not open. I am not allowing anything to come in that isn't for your betterment. I'm not open to receiving that, because that's not what you're here for, and that's not what's going to make your life better.
Right.
And the way that I'm working with it, my intention and the way I'm holding the technology is for the betterment of you, for the intention of you receiving what is helpful.
Yeah, that's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
and the coaching, because like I'll even say that actually in calls. I'll say, okay, so me, Vanessa Lambert, I'm going to come in now and just maybe share a little bit with you about how I think you could work with this. But again, that delineation, this is not records. This is me actually now stepping forward as coach. But,
But it's incredibly important. So, and this is kind of the thing that I was alluding to, is like your perspective on this stuff and experience with it is probably pretty unique, and it's like, it's the same kind of thing you run into in the plant medicine world, right? So it's like, if there's no aftercare, if there's no integration of the information, it was probably just a good time, or maybe a really weird time. You know what I mean? Like it's that follow-up stuff. If the goal is to have people improve their lives or see their lives in a different way that allows it to feel improved, like whatever that looks like, then there's like, what you're bringing to the table is what people need. You know what I mean? Like that's the experience. That's the level of nuance. Cause it doesn't, all it takes, it's not like you have to teach people how to be good coaches. And if they're not good coaches, then they're screwed in all of this. It's just it's a mindset shift around how you look at that information, like to me, that's the deal. Cause anyway.
Well, yeah. And I think this is part of the calling. This is part of why I'm saying, like, I think my frequency was finally high enough to hold this stuff in a way that can be helpful and positive and beneficial. And I can bring it in that way, because I want to be a beacon of help and love and light for people. I don't want do no harm, like, for sure. That's definitely first and foremost. And everything that we are creating is for the good of you, the good of all, the good. And that's encapsulated in the prayer. This reading is for the good of you and all mankind. It's for the good of all.
It's the whole deal. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to completely shift gears, because you mentioned the prayer again, the like opening of it. So how do you, there's a parallel there between the tuning in of a Kundalini set, right? And the opening prayer of this Akashic thing. Do you see it in a similar way, that it's like you're tapping into the lineage of this practice?
Yeah. I think I'm tapping in directly to the Akashic field, but I think, that's what's happening, is that the prayer is giving you that access point, and exactly like the tuning in on Kundalini is connecting you to the golden chain of teachers. I feel like the prayer is just tapping you directly into the source of the field, the Akashic field. Yeah.
One of these days, we're going to figure all this shit out.
I know, and it's going to be so awesome because I'm going to be like, see?
I told you so.
I told you guys this was real, and it works.
Yeah.
And, you know, it might even be that it's real because I believe it's real, and like that creates,
whatever. Yeah.
But it's still real, and it's still creating life in a really freaking beautiful way. And that is the one thing I would leave people with. This technology is making my life more beautiful. It's making the people I work with lives more beautiful. It's making us feel more connected to source and to our divine purpose. It's making us feel like we have an intrinsic power over our own domain, our own energetic field, our own field of consciousness. It's making us feel embodied and emboldened to really create our life in a powerful, unique way. And I think that that's what the technology is here to do. And the Kundalini is awesome for that. And we'll be doing Kundalini this entire time. I'll have we'll be dedicated to a certain set to help support us in this, just from a field of energy perspective, so that we can be powerful in the way that we work with this technology, and we can make a happier, more positive imprint into this unique reality that we're all living in.
Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah.
So what's up? Click the link below.
Yeah, click the link below. And if you want to hop on a call, I really think it's helpful to hop on a call if you have any kind of inkling towards this, because I've talked to a few people and actually even told them, I don't think it's right for you right now. I think that you need to do a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and then it would be good later on. Or, you know, so I really have... I really believe in actually the connection individually with people. And so if you want to talk about this or see if it's right for you, reach out to me directly at Vanessa@BeTheWellness.com, and let's set something up. I'm going to give you the website below because I want people to get an overview and kind of get a semblance of the time commitment and what it looks like to be in this field. But if you're still like, okay, I've looked it over and it looks good and I'm just not sure, I have a few questions, and let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Yeah. I already believe that the people who are going to be in this class and are meant to be in this class they're going to find it, and they're going to participate in this first round. I can already feel that there's people energetically out there that are not appropriate for this round, but are already intrinsically tuned into next round. And I don't know when that's going to be yet, because this is my first time running it. I don't know that energetically I'll want to run them back to back. I really don't know. Once I get through this, I'll set the dates for the new one. I'm thinking I'll do another one in 4 or 5 months, maybe. But if this is speaking to you and something inside of you at sort of a spirit level is like, yes, 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 I need this technology in my life, then I would encourage you to not allow the second wave of reasons that come in and talk you out of it to get in the way. If your initial gut was like, yes, 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 I need this, then clear off the human stuff and don't let that take precedent.
Yeah.
Let the soul speak.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too. And I can't wait to jump into this class. Honestly, I was saying this on the call. I literally feel like I've been training my whole life for this. Like, this is the moment where I can deliver something that I've been preparing for my whole life. It's really, really, it's actually something to behold. Like, for me personally, it's like, wow, it all kind of makes sense now. Yeah.
Well, that's seems to be how it goes.
Yep, it is.
It all works out in the end.
It all works out.
All right, folks. So yeah, definitely check that thing out down below. And I mean, FYI, this is the first time Vanessa's given her personal email address on the podcast. Although, frankly, not that hard to figure out.
Not that hard to guess.
The Vimify guys would have guessed it. But yeah, check it out. Yeah. Get on the phone. Talk it about it.
Talk it about it.
All right, guys. We love you.
Bye. See ya. Bye.